The Ashen Key Murders, Part 4. Chapter 19. The trial turns against them. Underground vaults. The Glass Manor. 10:15 p.m. The stench of blood and damp stone clung to the air as Alistair Graves stepped over the unconscious body of Corwin Vale. The rival executioner lay motionless, his breathing shallow, his dark coat already slick with blood from the wound in his shoulder. Eleanor Blackwood knelt beside him, using the iron shackles once meant for Jonathan Whitmore to bind Vale's wrists. She worked quickly, her hands steady despite the tension in her eyes. Jonathan, still pale and weakened from captivity, leaned against the stone wall, rubbing his wrist where the metal had bitten into his skin. "Well," he muttered, voice hoarse. "That was unpleasant." Graves smirked, rolling his stiffened shoulder where Vale's bullet had nicked him. "I assume you mean the part where you were nearly executed?" Jonathan gave him a flat look. "Yes, Graves. That part." Eleanor finished securing Vale's chains and stood, brushing dust from her gown. "We don't have much time." She turned to Graves. "The trial is supposed to end at dawn. They'll be expecting you to return with Jonathan's corpse or your own." Jonathan sighed. "Lovely choice." Graves exhaled. He had already calculated their next move. "No one leaves this place alive unless they prove their loyalty," he murmured. "If I walk out of here without a body, Rathbone will know I defied the order." Eleanor's jaw tightened. "Then what do we do?" Graves' sharp eyes flicked toward the unconscious Vale, and a slow, dark smirk curved his lips. Jonathan groaned. "Oh no." Eleanor frowned. "What?" Graves knelt beside Vale, pressing 2 fingers against his pulse. Slow, weak, but still there. He glanced at Eleanor. "How convincing are your skills as a medic?" She stiffened. "What?" Graves' smirk sharpened. "We don't need a corpse," he said. "We just need them to believe we have one." Eleanor worked quickly, using a strip of fabric from Vale's own coat to bind his wound just tightly enough to slow the bleeding, without killing him. Jonathan watched her in silent horror. "You realize what you're doing," he muttered. Eleanor didn't look up. "Yes." Jonathan shook his head. "You're staging my execution." Graves smiled faintly. "Precisely." Jonathan sighed. "I hate you." Graves clapped a hand on his shoulder. "Excellent. That will make this more convincing." Jonathan groaned. "You love this, don't you?" Graves' smirk deepened. "You know me too well." Eleanor wiped blood from her hands. "It's done." Vale's wound was dressed, his arms and legs tightly bound. His coat had been swapped onto Jonathan, and his face obscured by shadows. At a glance, he could pass for a corpse. Graves studied Eleanor's work critically, then nodded. "Good." He stood, rolling his shoulders. "Now, all that's left is selling the illusion." Eleanor exhaled sharply. "And if it doesn't work?" Graves smiled. "Then we improvise." Jonathan groaned. "I hate improvisation." Graves smirked. "Not when I do it." The ballroom, 11:15 p.m. The ballroom of the Glass Manor was eerily silent as Graves and Eleanor stepped through the arched doorway, the weight of the society's gaze pressing down upon them. Masked figures lined the grand chamber, their expressions unreadable. Some stood in small clusters, their murmurs hushed. Others watched with keen interest. At the top of the grand staircase, Lord Julian Rathbone stood beneath the glow of a massive chandelier. His expression remained calm, but his sharp, assessing gaze flicked downward toward Graves. And the body he carried. Jonathan, wrapped in a dark cloak, was slumped against Graves' shoulder, his body motionless. The illusion was perfect. A single breath from Jonathan could ruin everything. But Jonathan, to his credit, remained deathly still. Rathbone stepped forward. "Mr. Graves." Graves inclined his head politely. "Lord Rathbone." The elder man's gaze drifted to the corpse. His eyes gleamed. "So, you have completed the task." A silence fell over the room. Graves did not blink. As expected, Eleanor stood at Graves' side, her fists clenched beneath the folds of her gown. She knew this was the most dangerous moment. One mistake, one flicker of doubt, and they would be executed before midnight. Rathbone descended a single step. He gestured toward 2 masked enforcers. "Take the body," he murmured. Graves' pulse remained calm. Now is when the game begins." He tightened his grip on Jonathan's shoulder just slightly. A silent warning. Then, smoothly, he stepped forward. "Forgive me, my lord," he murmured. "But I would rather deliver this to the archives myself." Rathbone paused. The room held its breath. "Oh," Rathbone murmured. Graves nodded. "I believe the society wishes to keep its loose ends private. His lips curled faintly. It would be rather inconvenient if an initiate's failure were to be discovered, wouldn't it? He flipped the script, turned their test against them, made it seem as though he were simply protecting their interests. A pause. Then a Rathbone smirked. Amused. Intrigued. You are learning, he murmured. Graves merely inclined his head. One must, in such an exclusive company. Another silence. Then Rathbone waved a hand. Very well. A flick of his wrist. Take it to the vault. And just like that, they had permission to walk away. The outer corridor, 11:30 p.m. The moment they stepped beyond the ballroom doors, Eleanor exhaled sharply. Graves kept walking. Not yet. Jonathan's fingers twitched slightly. Are we? Graves muttered lowly. Don't move. Not yet. Two guards followed them at a distance. Watching. Waiting. Eleanor swallowed. They're testing us. Graves nodded subtly. Of course they are. He turned down a secondary corridor, keeping his stride even. Confident. They needed an exit. And they needed it now. Eleanor murmured, You have a plan, don't you? Graves smirked. Do you trust me? Eleanor sighed. Unfortunately. Jonathan muttered. That's never a good sign. Graves reached into his coat pocket and pressed something small and metallic into Eleanor's palm. A matchbook. She blinked, then understood. Her fingers curled around it, and as they turned the final corner toward the vaults, she let it drop. A spark. A whisper of flame. And behind them, fire erupted. The alarm screamed. Guards shouted. And in the chaos, Graves grabbed Eleanor and Jonathan and ran. Straight toward the hidden passage leading out of the manor. Because while the society was busy trying to contain the blaze, the real fire was already burning in the dark. And Graves was about to turn their entire world against them. Chapter 20, The Fire and the Phantom. The Glass Manor, 11:45 p.m. The fire spread fast. Flames licked up the velvet-draped walls, consuming everything in their path. The gold chandeliers flickered, their light battling against the roaring orange glow. Smoke curled through the grand corridors, thick and acrid, sending guests and guards alike scrambling for escape. And in the midst of it, Alistair Graves ran. Eleanor Blackwood and Jonathan Whitmore were just behind him, their movements quick, but precise. They had only minutes before the society realized the fire wasn't an accident. Graves, Eleanor hissed, dodging past a falling tapestry, please tell me we have an exit. Graves smirked. We do. Jonathan wheezed. Is it on fire? Graves didn't answer. Because technically, it might be. The Glass Manor had been built with more than one secret passage. Graves had memorized the blueprints years ago when he first tangled with the society. And he knew that beneath the marble floors, past the vaulted cellars, there was one final tunnel. A forgotten servants' corridor, built long before the manor became the society's den. And now, it was their only way out. Graves reached an unassuming bookshelf, pressing his hand against the right panel. A faint click. The wall shifted. The hidden door swung open. Eleanor exhaled. Thank God. Jonathan stumbled inside, groaning. Less talking. More running. Graves slipped in last, slamming the panel shut just as a group of enforcers stormed into the burning corridor. The moment the door sealed, darkness swallowed them whole. Eleanor lit a match, its small flame casting an eerie glow over the damp, narrow passage. Where does this lead? She whispered. Graves' eyes gleamed. To the river. Meanwhile, the grand ballroom. Lucian Thorne stood at the top of the grand staircase, watching the chaos unfold. His golden eye flickered with something close to amusement. The fire had been deliberate, planned. And the only man in this wretched building who had the audacity to set the society ablaze was Graves. Thorne exhaled, adjusting his cufflinks. Mr. Graves, he murmured to himself. You never do things halfway. A masked enforcer approached, his voice urgent. My Lord Graves has vanished. So has the prisoner. Thorne smiled faintly. Yes, he murmured. I expected as much. His gaze drifted toward the burning hallways. Then he turned on his heel. I want every exit sealed, he commanded. No one leaves this manor unless I say so. The enforcer hesitated. And if we find Graves? Thorne's smile widened. Oh, we will find him. He turned, striding toward the lower levels. And when we do, I intend to give him a proper welcome. Hidden passage beneath the Glass Manor, 12 a.m. The tunnel sloped downward, the air growing thicker, colder. Jonathan stumbled, catching himself against the wall. This is hell. Eleanor gave him a wry look. If it were hell, you'd already be dead. Jonathan grumbled. Small mercies. Graves kept moving, leading them deeper into the passage. Then he stopped. His sharp eyes flicked toward the ceiling. A faint, almost imperceptible noise. Boots. Above them. Eleanor tensed. They know. Graves' jaw tightened. They're tracking us. Jonathan muttered. You do realize we're trapped? Yes? Graves smirked. Not yet. He turned to Eleanor. How good are you at setting distractions? She blinked. You mean more fire? Graves' smirk widened. Yes. Eleanor sighed. I worry about you. Jonathan exhaled. We all worry about him. Eleanor moved quickly, using the last of the oil-soaked rags from her pouch. Graves worked alongside her, setting the perfect trap. Jonathan, despite being injured, dug into the old crates lining the corridor, finding enough debris to feed the fire. Then Graves struck a match. The flame flickered for a second, then erupted. Heat rushed through the tunnel, smoke curling upward toward the main house. And above them, shouts of alarm. The fire's spreading underground. Close the cellar doors. Block the tunnels. Jonathan grinned. I believe that worked. Graves smirked. You underestimate my talent for destruction. Eleanor rolled her eyes. Less gloating. More escaping. And with that, they ran. Thames River Dock, 12:30 a.m. The hidden tunnel emerged beneath a decrepit dock, the water dark and still. A single boat was moored at the edge, small, battered, but functional. Graves exhaled. This will do. Jonathan collapsed into the boat, groaning. If we survive this, I'm never leaving my office again. Eleanor muttered. You don't even have an office. Jonathan sighed. Then I'll build one. Just so I can never leave it. Graves smirked, stepping into the boat and gripping the oars. He glanced back toward the distant manor, its upper windows ablaze. They weren't safe yet. The society would not forget this. Nor would Lucian Thorne. Eleanor pulled her cloak tighter. Where do we go now? Graves' smirk faded slightly. Now? Now, they had to disappear. But only for a while. Because the Ashen Key Society wasn't just hunting them. They were rebuilding their forces. And soon, they would come for London itself. Graves tightened his grip on the oars. Now, he murmured, we prepare for war. Chapter 21. A City on the Brink. The Thames River, 12:45 a.m. The boat drifted through the black waters, the ripples catching the flickering glow of London's gas lamps in the distance. Alistair Graves rowed with deliberate strokes, his sharp gaze scanning the fog-covered docks ahead. Beside him, Eleanor Blackwood sat rigid, her cloak wrapped tightly around her shoulders. At the back of the boat, Dr. Jonathan Whitmore lay sprawled, one hand pressed against his side, where his wound had reopened during their escape. I'm fine, Jonathan muttered, though his face was pale. Graves didn't bother looking at him. You're lying. Jonathan sighed. I always lie when I'm bleeding. It makes the situation less depressing. Eleanor shot Graves a glare. We need to get him medical attention. Graves nodded. I know just the place. He turned the boat toward the southern docks, where the fog was thickest. The society would be hunting them. They needed to disappear. Fast. And that meant heading straight into the city's underworld. The Blackthorn Tavern, Southwark, 1:30 a.m. The Blackthorn Tavern was not a respectable establishment. It sat tucked between two warehouses, its wooden beams blackened with soot, its clientele consisting of thieves, informants, and men who had long abandoned the law. Perfect. Graves pushed open the heavy door, leading Eleanor and the half-conscious Jonathan inside. The air was thick with pipe smoke and the scent of spilled gin. Conversations lowered to murmurs as patrons glanced their way. Then, a familiar voice. Well. A man in a patched waistcoat leaned against the bar, his grin showing gold-capped teeth. Mr. Graves, he drawled. What brings you to my establishment at such a godforsaken hour? Graves smirked. Business, of course. The man's grin widened. Business for trouble? Graves tilted his head. Is there a difference? Upstairs room, Blackthorn Tavern. Graves shut the door behind them, leaving the noise of the tavern below. Jonathan collapsed into a chair, wincing. Eleanor turned to their host, hands on her hips. Who is this? The man gave a flourishing bow. Ezra Finch, at your service. Eleanor blinked. The smuggler. Ezra grinned. Oh, so you've heard of me. Graves exhaled. Ezra, I need information. And a place to disappear. Ezra chuckled. Information is expensive. Graves tossed a small pouch of coins onto the table. Then consider this a down payment. Ezra raised an eyebrow. And what exactly do you want to know? Graves leaned forward. The Ashen Key Society isn't finished. Ezra's grin vanished. Them. His voice lowered. Graves, you don't poke that nest unless you want to get buried. Graves' eyes glinted. I don't intend to poke the nest. His voice dropped. I intend to burn it to the ground. Ezra sighed, running a hand through his unkempt hair. All right, he muttered. You didn't hear this from me, but he glanced at Eleanor and Jonathan. They're planning something big. Graves' jaw tightened. How big? Ezra leaned closer. Big enough that every crime lord, corrupt official, and hidden power in London is getting nervous. Eleanor's fingers curled into fists. What are they planning? Ezra hesitated. Then, they're moving against the House of Lords. Jonathan stiffened. Graves' expression darkened. That's madness. Ezra shrugged. They don't care. They're done operating in the shadows. They want control. Real control. Graves exhaled. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were expanding. And soon, no one in London would be safe. Eleanor swallowed. Then we have to stop them. Jonathan scoffed. And how do you propose we do that? March into their stronghold and ask them politely to dismantle their empire. Graves' smirk returned. Something like that. Eleanor groaned. Oh God. Jonathan muttered. I knew he'd say that. Graves leaned back, his sharp mind already working. If the society was planning a coup, then there was one thing they needed most. Money, resources, and absolute loyalty. Which meant there was one weak point. Their financiers, Graves murmured. Ezra's brow furrowed. You mean their bankers? Graves nodded. The society needs backing. And I know exactly who's funding them. Eleanor's eyes widened. Lord Ellington. Jonathan muttered a curse. The man who funds half of London's crime rings. Graves smirked. Time to pay him a visit. Ezra sighed. You're insane. Graves grinned. And yet, you'll help me. Ezra muttered. I hate that you're right. Eleanor straightened. Where is Ellington's estate? Ezra exhaled. North of the city. He keeps his vaults beneath an old textile mill. Heavy security. Impossible to breach. Graves smirked. Impossible. Jonathan groaned. Graves, please. Just once, let's not commit a crime. Graves stood, adjusting his coat. Oh, I wouldn't call it a crime. His eyes gleamed. I'd call it a heist. Chapter 22, The Grand Heist. Lord Ellington's textile mill, Northern London, 2:45 a.m. The textile mill loomed over the surrounding slums, a dark silhouette against the moonlit sky. The tall brick smokestacks, once churning with industrial fumes, now stood silent, their true purpose long forgotten. This was no longer a place for fabric production. This was Lord Ellington's personal vault, a fortress where the Ashen Key Society's wealth was stored, laundered, and redistributed to fund their growing power. And tonight, it was Graves' target. Inside the shadowed alley across the street, Alistair Graves, Eleanor Blackwood, Dr. Jonathan Whitmore, and Ezra Finch huddled near the abandoned loading dock. Ezra wiped his hands on his coat. Right. Just so I'm clear, this is madness. Graves smirked. That's why it will work. Ezra sighed. Of course. Eleanor tightened her gloves. How much time do we have? Graves glanced at his pocket watch. Less than an hour before the next shift change. We'll need to be inside and gone before dawn. Jonathan sighed, still adjusting his bandaged ribs. So, what's the plan? Graves pulled out a blueprint of the textile mill, spreading it against a crate. He tapped the north entrance. This is our way in. The old smokestack tunnels lead directly beneath the mill's main vault. Lord Ellington converted them into a hidden treasury. Eleanor frowned. And the guards. Graves smirked. Ezra grinned. Already taken care of. Bribed a few lads to stage a drunken brawl just down the street. Should keep the watchmen distracted. Jonathan muttered. Good to know we're using highly professional methods. Ezra clapped him on the shoulder. You'll live, Doctor. Graves pointed to the vault chamber. We get inside, seize their ledgers, take anything valuable, and disappear before they even realize we were here. Eleanor crossed her arms. And if something goes wrong? Graves smiled. Then we improvise. Jonathan groaned. I hate when you say that. Textile mill. Underground access. 3 a.m. The air was thick with soot and dust as Graves led them through a narrow drainage tunnel beneath the mill. The old brick walls were cold and damp, remnants of the original industrial piping that once ran beneath London's factory districts. Ezra whispered, You're certain this leads to the vault? Graves tapped the iron grate ahead of them. One way to find out. He twisted a rusted valve, and with a deep groan, the metal gate creaked open. Beyond it, a stairwell leading up, straight into the underbelly of Ellington's fortune. Ellington's underground treasury, 3:15 a.m. The room beyond the stairwell was nothing short of a kingdom of gold. Stacks of coin-filled chests, ledgers bound in black leather, and rows of locked safes lined the chamber, illuminated by dim lanterns. Jonathan exhaled. Good God. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. This is where they funnel all their money? Graves nodded. And now, it's ours. Ezra cracked his knuckles. Let's make it quick. Eleanor and Jonathan immediately went to work rifling through the ledgers, looking for the most incriminating records, accounts of bribes, assassinations, and laundering schemes. Ezra moved to the chests, expertly picking the locks with swift precision. Graves worked on the main vault, his fingers deftly turning the dials of the safe. Click. Click. The final tumbler fell into place. The safe swung open. Inside, stacks of bearer bonds, gold bars, and correspondence between the society's highest members. Graves smirked. We just found their Achilles heel. Jonathan muttered, and now we steal it? Graves tilted his head. Stealing is such an unpleasant word. I prefer confiscate. Ezra grinned. Oh, I like you. They moved quickly, stuffing what they could into bags. Then, a sharp noise from above. A door slamming open. Footsteps. Descending fast. Jonathan froze. Tell me that's you improvising. Graves' smirk faded. No, Eleanor whispered. They found us. Ellington's vault, 3:30 a.m. The first gunshot cracked through the silence. Ezra swore. Time to go. Eleanor grabbed the last stack of ledgers, stuffing them into her satchel. Which way? Graves had already calculated their next move. There's a side passage through the ventilation tunnels. If we reach it before they cut us off, more footsteps, closer now. Then, a voice. Smooth. Familiar. Well, Graves. Lucian Thorne. Standing at the top of the stairwell, flanked by two armed enforcers. His golden eye glinted. I should have known you wouldn't leave quietly. Graves smirked. Where's the fun in that? Thorne sighed. You've stolen from the wrong people. Graves tilted his head. I steal from everyone. Thorne chuckled. Then let's make this simple. He raised a hand, a silent signal. The enforcers raised their pistols. Eleanor and Jonathan tensed. Then, Ezra flicked his wrist. A small metal sphere rolled across the floor and exploded in a blinding flash of light. Smoke erupted through the chamber, filling the air with thick, choking fog. Eleanor grabbed Jonathan. Move. They bolted toward the side tunnels. Graves was the last to follow, but not before locking eyes with Thorne one final time. Thorne's voice was low, dangerous. This isn't over, Graves. Graves smirked. Oh, I know. And then he vanished into the smoke. Back streets of London, 4:15 a.m. They emerged from the tunnels, breathless but victorious. Ezra grinned, patting the satchel of stolen ledgers. I'd say that went exceedingly well. Jonathan groaned. I hate all of you. Eleanor smiled. Then you must be feeling better. Graves exhaled. They had the society's financial secrets. And soon, they would bring the entire empire crashing down. But first, they needed to disappear. He turned to Ezra. Get us new identities. We need to vanish for a while. Ezra smirked. Oh, I love this part. Eleanor frowned. Where do we go? Graves' eyes gleamed. Paris. Jonathan groaned. We're committing international crimes now? Graves smirked. Oh, doctor. He adjusted his coat, stepping into the London fog. The game has only just begun. Epilogue. The Ashen Key's last shadow. 1 month later, a hidden café in Montmartre, Paris. The café was quiet, tucked away on a narrow street where few tourists ventured. The wooden tables were small, the scent of freshly brewed coffee and warm bread filling the air. Outside, the city of Paris bustled with its usual rhythm, carriages rattling over cobblestones, street performers luring small crowds, and the Seine shimmering beneath the afternoon sun. But inside the café, 3 figures sat in the farthest corner, their voices low. Alistair Graves. Eleanor Blackwood. Dr. Jonathan Whitmore. Their clothes had changed. Graves now wore a well-tailored Parisian coat, his signature cane still by his side. Eleanor had traded her Victorian gowns for a sleeker, European silhouette, and Jonathan. Well, Jonathan still looked exasperated. He stirred his coffee, sighing. Tell me again why we haven't relocated to a safer country? Eleanor smirked. You mean somewhere with fewer aristocratic murder cults? Jonathan gestured vaguely. Yes, that. Graves chuckled, sipping his dark espresso. Because, my dear Jonathan, this is precisely where we need to be. Eleanor leaned forward. You're certain the society is still active? Graves' gaze darkened slightly. He set his cup down, pulling out a small folded letter from his coat. He placed it on the table. Eleanor and Jonathan exchanged a look. Slowly, Eleanor unfolded it. Inside was a single sentence, written in ink as black as night. You stole from the Ashen Key, Graves. We are coming. A chill settled over the table. Jonathan exhaled sharply. Lovely. Eleanor's fingers tightened around the letter. This means they survived. Graves nodded. Oh, they survived. His expression remained calm, but there was something different in his eyes. A spark. A calculation. A certainty. Jonathan muttered, You're enjoying this, aren't you? Graves smirked. Oh, doctor. He lifted his coffee cup. I do so love a good sequel. An undisclosed location, London. In a darkened study, illuminated only by the golden glow of candlelight, Lucian Thorne stood before a massive wooden desk. His golden eye gleamed as he read the report in his hands. A figure sat opposite him, shrouded in the shadows of a high-backed chair. Their fingers drummed softly against the polished wood. So, the voice murmured, smooth and deliberate. Mr. Graves has escaped. Thorne smirked. For now. A pause. The figure tilted their head. And what are the stolen ledgers? Thorne closed the report with a soft thud. They think they've won, he mused. That they've crippled us. A flicker of amusement crossed his face. But the society is more than its ledgers. He turned toward the window, looking out over the London skyline. They have forced our hand, he murmured. But in doing so, his voice dropped into a whisper. They have set the stage for something much, much larger. A pause. Then, the figure in the chair finally spoke. Then it is time. A single gold key was placed on the table, its surface gleaming in the candlelight. Let the world see what happens, the voice murmured, when you try to steal from the masters of fate. A chill settled in the room. Thorne smiled. And the game continued.
Every mystery leaves a mark. And the next case is already unfolding. If you enjoyed the story, subscribe, like, and share. There are more secrets waiting to be uncovered. Join us in the next chapter of A Study in Secrets.